buried in a vast pit. Must have struck with terrific force. The ground is covered with splinters of a tree. It must have struck on its way down. But I can see the object itself doesn't look very much like a meteor. At least not the meteors I've seen. It looks more like a huge cylinder. Has a diameter of, what would you say, Professor Pearson?
What's that?
What would you say, what's the diameter of this?
About 30 yards.
About 30.
Because that's a very special sort of radio. Its type was one of the most elegant consoles on the market. Now, with its fabric-covered speakers, its peculiar yellow dial, its serrated knobs, it looks quaint and a little strange.
Hey guys, welcome back. So today's video is going to be pretty special because I'm going to be talking about my Westinghouse 1934 WR-28 that I received from my grandfather when I was very young. And it was actually my grandfather who had recently passed away in the last year or so this video is for him. But this radio is really, really cool. At the time when I got the radio, I was very into antiques and specifically antique radios. I should also add that the reason why I was so interested in antique appliances specifically was actually because when I was a little kid I loved the movie The Brave Little Toaster. And for those who have seen it, it's actually made very important in the sequels especially, which aren't as good, but they're still part of it. It's made very clear that this is a tube radio that we're dealing with, and the tube is important later on. But that's why I actually really wanted a tube radio, because learning about tube radios from the Brave Little Toaster, they fascinated me because they lit up, and I knew what a transistor was. And it's like, a transistor is so small, you would never see a transistor, but that's basically what you're looking at in a tube radio. And so all of that just fascinated me, and the Brave Little Toaster is going to get a video of its own someday, because that's an amazing work of animation. I mean, I rewatched it recently, and to this day, it's a good movie, it's for kids, right, but it's still, like, a good movie, I think. I enjoyed it, and I enjoyed it a lot when I was a kid, just because it does have a lot of references to antique appliances, and that is pretty cool, and especially being somebody who grew up liking antique appliances. Because of that movie, it's kind of a self-continuing cycle. The movie made me like antique appliances, and then I have an appreciation for the movie, not only for its amazing animation, but also for its many references to antique appliances. And this specific radio here had been in our family for 85 years. Basically, when it was purchased by my great Uncle Bill, he had it in the family and eventually gave it to my grandpa when he passed away, and now it was given to me. Like I said, I got this radio when I was really young. It was at the time, like I said, when I was into collecting antiques, and my grandpa thought this is the perfect gift for him at the time, and it was. This is an awesome antique right here. 1934 is around when most people started getting radio in their houses, and so this would be a very common radio that you would see in a lot of people's houses at the time. Now, this radio's tubes have burned out, but when I first received the radio, the tubes actually worked, and I was able to receive broadcasts on this 1934 Westinghouse. So I do kind of remember what the dials do. None of them are labeled, but I do remember, obviously, that this dial is tuning, and as you can see, we can tune the radio. And there's actually another dial that comes off of that, so it's a double dial. One is a bigger one, and then it comes out a little bit, and there's a smaller one on top of that. And as you can see, the dial had actually broken off. It was broken when I got it, and I actually had saved all the pieces in a bag. But now it's gone. Somebody threw that bag away, which is really too bad. First, I'm going to look for a real dial that is pulled off of one that doesn't work anymore. But I have a feeling that I'm not going to be able to find one because I can't even really find this radio anywhere besides on radio collector websites. Like, there's no other videos of this radio on YouTube, and I can't find them on eBay, so I would say that the dial is going to be pretty hard to find. So then I thought I might be able to 3D print one. That would be cool, but I would need to actually take the three-dimensional data of one of those dials. And then I would have to learn how to do 3D design and then design it in a software. Like, I'm not going to do that, But I think it looks fine just the way it is, especially from a distance, which is where you'd be seeing this mostly from anyways. But basically it's just like one of the dials is exposed. It still has a dial there that you can turn, so it still works. It just doesn't look quite as good. So then we have the dial on the far left here. I actually don't remember what this one does, because like it doesn't really make sense, because I know this one, that's power. And then I remember specifically that after you turn on the power, that was also how you do the volume here. You turn the dial up even further, and that was how you do volume. And then you turn the volume almost all the way down, and then you turn it off. So, and then obviously this one was switching from shortwave to standard, or shortwave to longwave radio. Now that's something else I had to do a little bit of research on before I made this video, was on shortwave radio. I've actually looked into it before. Like, I actually wanted to do ham radio a while ago. It just was kind of expensive for what it was, picking up radio signals. And I think you can do it on your computer too, just through an emulated shortwave ham radio receiver. But I know that shortwave basically is the kind of radio that bounces off the atmosphere, so you can pick it up from really far away. But I'm going to take a look on the other side in a second. But before we do that, I just wanted to talk about one more thing about this radio. And that is the way that this felt, or whatever material that's behind the speaker, or in front of the speaker I should say, but behind this wood cutout. Just the way that this wood cutout with that material behind it looks. I mean, this radio is such a work of art, and radios at the time were. They were furniture works of art. I mean, this thing would blend in perfectly with all the other classic furniture of the time, specifically through the 1920s and the 1930s. I also really love the metal border around the glass cover of the dial. I think that looks really cool as well. Okay, so now we're looking into the back of the radio, and how radios and TVs a long time ago were, because you have these things called tubes instead of transistors, because this was before the advent of the transistor. This is before we discovered that silicon acts as a semiconductor, where if we apply electricity to it, it now becomes conductive and can pass a signal through. Before we knew that, we used a vacuum tube. Now how the vacuum tube works is it has a gas in it that is a semiconductor, instead of using a solid-state semiconductor. And that is why a lot of 70s and 60s radios that use transistors say solid-state on them. But the thing about this radio is that it has a lot of tubes in it, but only 2 of them are accessible, really. You can only pull 2 of them out like this. See? And I've actually never done that. This is the first time I've ever pulled the tube out of this radio, because I haven't really gone to replace the tube, because I don't know where to get them at retail. But I did recently find a website where I can buy vacuum tubes, specifically these ones. So I'm actually going to be making another video where I replace all the tubes in this radio and I make the thing work again, because it worked when I was a kid. And I remember turning the thing on and seeing these vacuum tubes glow up. Oh man, it was just incredible. And these are the original RCA tubes that came with the radio in 1934. There's one peg hole that's larger than the others so that you have it oriented properly. So here you actually can see a diagram of the tube locations. Here's the 42 and 80 right here, but then we have 4 more tubes, 2 more in the front here, and 2 more in the back. Here we have the inside of the dial, and as you can see, there's a very small light bulb there that lights up the face of the dial. And then we get to one of the most interesting parts of the radio. Now, I have an adapter on this plug, but when we take the adapter off of the plug, you will see that the plug for this radio is actually something that would fit in a light bulb socket. And that is because at the time of when this radio was released, the only things that ran on electricity in people's houses were light bulbs. That is just incredible in the way that it was designed. Because looking back on it now, it's sort of ridiculous to think that the only things that were run on electricity in people's houses were lights. This is the era that this radio comes from, and that is evidence of that. And then here, we have the antenna. Now, we have these initial antenna wires coming out of the radio, and then you have another one here that's kind of attached to it, jerry-rigged in a way. And this antenna wire would eventually go out the wall and up the side of the house to the very top of the house to an actual big antenna that was sitting on the top of the house. Because radio transmissions were a lot weaker than they are today, so they needed a bigger antenna to receive them, especially to receive them clearly. But regardless of if I can even get the thing to work, I will be keeping this radio forever for two reasons. First of all, because it is a nice looking piece of furniture. Second of all, and more importantly, it's been in my family for 85 years. Now, it's a very long time, and it's also something that I have a great appreciation for. It's an antique radio, an antique piece of technology. The first piece of technology that was commercially able to receive wireless transmissions. Basically, the first form of media in the household besides the newspaper. Now that is something incredible, and is why I love this 1934 Westinghouse WR-28.